Today, we're going to talk about a really fascinating financial idea called Coast Fire. Now, this isn't about quitting your job tomorrow. It's about something a little different. Giving your savings account an early retirement so that eventually you won't have to worry about it. So let me just throw this out there. What if you could hit a savings goal in your 30s, maybe your early 40s, and then just stop? Like, never save another penny for retirement, but still wind up with a huge nest egg, maybe over $1 million. I know, it sounds kind of impossible, but that's the core promise of this thing called Coast Fire. To really get how this works, we got to take one step back and look at the bigger picture. It all comes from the FIRE movement. That's financial independence, retire early. And the whole thing is built around getting to one specific magic number. At its heart, FIRE is really a lifestyle choice. It's all about saving and investing a huge chunk of your income, like way more than normal. The goal isn't just to retire, but to get the freedom to live life completely on your own terms, often decades before anyone else. So the big question is, how do you know when you've saved enough? Well, this whole community basically runs on one simple but incredibly powerful piece of math. It's called the Rule of 25. And this little rule is the engine that makes the whole idea of financial independence even possible. Here's how it works. It's super simple. First, you just figure out how much you think you'll need to live on for 1 year in retirement. Let's just say, for example, it's $50,000. Then you take that number and multiply it by 25. The result, in this case, 1.25 million, that's your FIRE number. That's the target you need to hit to call yourself financially independent. Okay, so where does the number 25 come from? It's not just pulled out of thin air. It's basically the flip side of the famous 4% rule. This came out of some really groundbreaking research back in 1994 by a guy named William Bengen. He looked at tons of historical data and figured out you could safely take out 4% of your portfolio every year and not run out of money for at least 30 years. So 25 times your expenses, that's just the other side of that 4% coin. Right, so that's the foundation. But not everyone wants to or can sprint at 1,000 miles an hour to the finish line. And that's where our main topic, Coast Fire, comes in. If traditional fire is the destination, think of Coast Fire as the totally different and, for a lot of people, a much more achievable way to get there. So with traditional fire, the whole point is to go all out, saving maybe 50, 60, even 70% of your income for years until your nest egg can pay for everything. Coast Fire has a different goal. The idea here is to save like crazy just until your nest egg is big enough that compound interest alone will grow it into your full retirement number. And after you hit that point, you stop saving for retirement completely. The best way to think about it is like a financial snowball. You do all the hard work up front, pushing that snowball to the top of a really, really long hill. But once it's sitting up there, you can just walk away. Time and gravity, or in this case, the magic of compound interest, will do all the heavy lifting for you, turning it into a giant avalanche of money by the time it reaches the bottom. Okay, that sounds amazing, right? But how do you know when that snowball is big enough to leave alone? Let's get into the practical side of things and figure out how you can actually calculate your own Coast Fire number. So how do we find this number? The formula might look a little intimidating, but trust me, the concept is simple. All it's doing is working backward. It's figuring out how much money you need invested today so that, with a certain rate of return over a certain number of years, it'll grow into your final retirement goal all by itself. Let's walk through an example. Let's say your big retirement goal is $1.5 million by the time you're 65. Right now, you're 35, so that gives your money 30 years to grow. If we assume a pretty standard 7% average annual return from the market, well, you do the math, and your Coast Fire number today is just under $200,000. Think about that. If you have that much invested at 35, you could, in theory, never put another dollar into your retirement accounts again. And this is where you can really see the mind-blowing power of starting early. I mean, look at this. To hit that same $1.5 million goal, a 25-year-old only needs to get to about $100,000. But if you wait until you're 45, whoa, you need almost 4 times that much. That right there, that is compound interest in action. It's just incredible. So let's say you've done the math, you've saved aggressively, and bam, you've hit your number. What happens now? Well, this is way more than just a financial milestone. It's a fundamental shift in your entire relationship with work, with money, with your life. The moment you hit that number, your main financial goal just changes overnight. all that immense pressure to save for the future, it's just gone. Your new job, your much, much simpler job, is to just earn enough to cover your bills today. That's it. The game has changed. And when you break it down, you can see just how manageable that new goal can be. I mean, if your annual expenses are $50,000, that just means you need to earn about $24 an hour in a full-time job to cover it. All of a sudden, financial freedom isn't some abstract concept about having millions in the bank. It's about covering a very real, very achievable hourly wage. The financial perks are obvious, right? But the psychological benefits, honestly, they might be even more powerful. When you're no longer depending on your job for your future security, you gain this incredible leverage. You can dial down the stress, negotiate harder for what you want, take a pay cut for a job you're passionate about, start that business you've been dreaming of. You can just live life differently. Okay, this all sounds pretty fantastic, I get it. But it's really important we approach this with a healthy dose of realism. This strategy relies on long-term averages in the market, and let's be honest, the future is never guaranteed. So let's talk about the risks and how to manage them. So to make this plan as solid as possible, it's really smart to be conservative. Maybe use a lower expected return in your calculations, like 5 or 6%. It'll mean your coast number is higher, but it builds in a safety net. And you absolutely have to factor in things like future healthcare costs and inflation. And this is the big one. This entire plan collapses if you dip into that retirement money early. You have to let it grow, completely untouched. And that really brings us to the most important takeaway here. Coast Fire isn't really about stopping work. It's about getting to a point way earlier than most people think is possible, where working becomes a choice instead of a necessity. It's about the freedom to design the life you actually want to live. It's a really powerful idea, isn't it? It completely reframes how we think about our careers and what retirement even means. And it leaves us with one final, pretty personal question to think about. If you had that freedom, if you had that choice, what would you do with it?